Hello, I'm Dave and this is Fiver, out once again for a walk in the New Forest. Thanks for joining us. Today we're right next to the Rockford Sandpit, and it's basically a disused sandpit by Rockford Common in the New Forest, located about 2 miles north of Ringwood in Hampshire. We're going to be walking a roughly 4.5 mile circular route. We'll start here at Rockford Common and then head north over the Dockens Water, past the Newlands Plantation and up to the open heathland of Ibsley Common, and then on to Chibden Bottom, past Robin Hood's Clump, and then we'll head south close to a section of the Avon Valley Path, and then past Moyles Court and back to our starting point. And I expect there'll be lots of interesting things to see along the way. Now, I'm filming at the beginning of March. It looks like it's going to be one of those glorious early spring days. The sun's out, a bit of blue sky, a little bit of cloud, but that's it burning off. I think it's going to be a perfect day for walking. Do come along with us. Well, I've parked my car for free at the moment at the National Trust car park by the Rockford Sandpit. I say at the moment, I say I'm filming in March. Next month in April, the Forestry England car parks, of which there are something like well over 120 I think throughout the New Forest, they're going to start charging for those, but at the moment I don't think they're going to be charging for the National Trust ones. Anyway, from sort of up here on a ridge looking over to I suppose it's over to the west where the car park is, there's some terrific views. In fact, where I'm standing now, I think it's called Three Trees Hills. If you look on an 1877 map and also an 1894 map, it shows 3 trees at the top up here, but they're all gone. I think the last one may have gone as recently as 40 years ago. There is a stump up here. I don't know whether that was it, but I'm not sure. But this is some terrific views. You can see some lakes over there, Blashford Lakes, and very, very far distant Summerlug House. But we'll talk about those a little bit later on in the walk. But we're going to kick on, heading, well, initially eastwards onto Rockford Common itself. Well, making my way eastwards along the side of Rockford Common, not too far away from the sandpit, and where I am now, I think, was the site of a medieval bee garden. I'm not 100% sure. Certainly if you look at a LiDAR picture, you can make out something. And this sort of beehive garden, well, would have been about 5 metres square. Some were rectangular, I believe, with banks, and there would have been wicker bee pots on wooden platforms covered in straw. There's so much gorse around here, it's so difficult to actually make anything out. So I'll say it's roughly around here. I'll say this is Rockford Common on my right. You can see this raised area on my left, almost like a ridge, and on a current Ordnance Survey map it shows that there are pillow mounds here and some further along, and these were man-made sort of low earth and stone mounds, and it would have been a sort of medieval rabbit warren system, basically for raising rabbits. Well, a lovely view of the common from this bench up here. Now, the common itself isn't in the old New Forest. In fact, if you look at an 1872 map, all the boundary stones marking out the boundary with the New Forest are over to the east. And the area was bought by a couple of local estates, presumably Moyles Court and Summerlug, I'm not sure, back in 1825. And the National Trust bought about 1,500 acres of common land here and also on Ibsley Common in 1999, and a further 32 acres in 2007. Oh, isn't that gorse looking quite magnificent? The yellow in the sunshine. I know it's in bloom for most of the year, it seems, isn't it? But particularly vibrant today. Oh, I tell you, getting quite warm now. It really is a beautiful day. This is the first film that Fiver and I have done for 2026. It's as if we're coming out of hibernation. Quite a sad one. Of course, it's the first film that I've made since I said goodbye to Logan. So I'll be thinking of him today as I wander along. And Fiver and I know this part of the forest quite well. We do quite a lot of our Canicross training with the Canicross New Forest group. We do a little 5-kilometre route around here. We've had quite a busy winter actually. Done quite a few 5k and 10k Canicross races. Got nice and muddy. Well, this is where we say goodbye to Rockford Common and start heading northwards down into a little valley, cross a road, and then we cross the Dockens Water and then head uphill onto Ibsley Common. Oh, I just simply had to stop to take this view in. Very much a typical New Forest heathland vista. And there's the Hazley enclosure in the very, very far distance. And then that bit of woodland on the top, that's the Whitefield Plantation. That's where we're heading for now. Oh, just about to cross over an old friend of ours, the Dockens Water. It's 6 miles long, roughly. The source is to the north of here at Fritham. In fact, Logan and I made a video where we followed the entire course of the river. It flows west into the Blashford Lakes and then into the River Avon and then out to sea at Christchurch. Well, just seeing the bridge here over the Dockens Water reminds me of this terrific book that I've got at home called Cuckoo Hill, the Book of Gourley. It was actually published in 1987, but it's based on the manuscripts that were started by Hayward Sumner in 1904. Now, Hayward Sumner was a painter, illustrator and archaeologist who lived in a house that we'll be passing quite close to later on at Cuckoo Hill. He actually died in 1940 at the age of 87, but it's a terrific book and it's quite unusual in that it's basically got copies of the handwritten notes that Sumner did, and it basically describes the story of him building the house here, but it also includes a lot of information about the various aspects of the New Forest. And one of the drawings and paintings that he did was a a bridge that was at this very spot. Obviously it's a much more modern bridge these days. I think it might be just a little bit too chilly for a dog dip today. He says, well, I'm having a think about it, but there's some sniffs. If I sniff here, you know, oh, he's getting close, having a little test. It's not really Whippet dog dip weather, I don't think. Nah, we'll wait till the summer. Come on then, fella. Well, crossed over the Dockens Water and now on to Ibsley Common, and there's a little sign here just reminding us that well, between March and August a lot of rare birds nesting on the ground. So for the rest of the walk I think I'm going to keep Fiver on a flexi lead and just keep to the main tracks. I love it up here. Sometimes I think this is one of the best times of year to be out because it's not too hot, you haven't got flies and all that sort of business, and you don't see too many people out either. You know, it's before the holiday season. Right, so that's the Whitefield Plantation over in the far distance. That's our next port of call. Well, we've made it to the side of the Whitefield Plantation. It's not very big. In fact, you can still see or make out the original bank and ditches that would have protected it when it was originally planted. And this, together with the clumps at Robin Hood Butt and also Dorridge to the north, were planted well between 1835 and 1840 by a chap called Welbore Ellis Agar, the second Lord Normanton. Basically to act as a landmark, but also somewhere for the Dowager Lady Normanton to ride to or drive in a carriage to sit and look back and admire the view back to Summerley over to the west, or Summerley House should I say, which is the family seat. Well, just to the side of the Whitefield Plantation is a rather splendid Trig Point, been whitewashed. You won't miss that on a sunny day, and of course, as is customary, that will be bagged in the normal fashion. A little update on the route. We're continuing to head, well, sort of eastwards, northeastwards I'd say, heading towards our next destination, something called the Huff-Duff. Aha, well, this is what we were looking for. This, folks, is the Huff-Duff. It's basically a remnant from the Second World War. There is an information board inside, so rather than me try and explain what it is, I'll put a photograph of the information board up. You can freeze the screen and read to your heart's content. But this is basically all that remains of it. There would have been a sort of wooden structure on top. I think we can actually go inside. Yeah, here we go, there's a little entrance, and make our way through. Oh, there we go. And there's the information board. Ibsley DF station. And you can still see down on the ground there the sort of iron bit sticking up, which is where the wooden bits would have been stuck onto back in the Second World War. Well, just to the south of the Huff-Duff are the remains of what was the accommodation building for the 2 or 3 operatives that used to look after the Huff-Duff. And you can just see underneath all that gorse over there the entrance to the air raid shelter that they would have been able to use should they have ever come under attack. Okay, well, the next section of the route, we're going to leave the Huff-Duff and head still north, and we're going to follow a track which takes us along the top of a ridge. This sort of valley down here is Chibden Bottom. And yeah, that clump of trees over there, Robin Hood Clump, that's our next destination. This is one of my favourite spots in the New Forest, Robin Hood's Clump. Now, an 1872 map shows something called Robin Hood's Butt, but it's actually a bit away from the trees actually. But there were 18 pine trees, Scots pine I think, that were planted here on a possible Bronze Age disc barrow. But the trees you see today, where they were planted in 1931 to replace the previous ones that had been damaged by a fire, I think the originals were planted by Lord Normanton in 1835, 1840, although I think Hayward Sumner suggests might have been 1850. But it really is a quite stunning spot just to take in some of these views, looking over to the north over there, and then just round to the west. Beautiful, isn't it? Well, we've left Robin Hood's Clump and we're heading westwards down off a ridge. Now, where Fiver is now, I don't know if you can see, there's a little sort of indentation, and I'm wondering whether this was once the location of a cockfighting pit. Now, Hayward Sumner suggests there was one here right by the path, and certainly if you look at a LiDAR picture, it does show an indentation. So I'm wondering if this is the remains of it here. I'm not sure how big they were though, that's the only problem, but could be. Well, another quite awesome view. So we're heading along the side of a ridge westwards, and that's Chibden Bottom down there. Very, very boggy. We've had one of the wettest winters on record, so pretty impenetrable down there, I should imagine. Well, it does look as though there's a handful of ponies down there grazing away. We're just on my right, just through those trees there. I can just about make out the roof of Cuckoo Hill, which was the house that Hayward Sumner lived in when he was here. I think it's a care home these days. We're not going to go down there. We did pass it when Logan and I did a walk at Hyde 2 or 3 years ago. We're just looking back where we've just come down. So that's Chibden Bottom on the right, and Robin Hood Clump just over the brow of the hill there. And well, if the telephone wires weren't here, you would have absolutely no sign of humanity at all. Well, as I often say, a New Forest walk wouldn't be a New Forest walk without spotting a New Forest pony. And this one here, gosh, still very much got your winter coat on. You'll be getting rid of that pretty soon, I should imagine. Oh, what a lovely sight. A real bonus. Just staring at us. I'll get my Canon out and try and use the zoom, so hopefully the picture's not too grainy. Well, we've made our way sort of southwards again, back onto Ibsley Common. Got a little bit muddy in places, but there you go. And where I am now, there's another one of those quite magical views. And isn't that quite stunning? There's a lovely bench here as well. A couple of sort of concrete cylinders here. I think that had something to do with the Second World War, possibly machine gun positions protecting what was once RAF Ibsley, which was down below. Now RAF Ibsley, which was built in 1941, closed in the 1950s, but it was still used for motor racing up until 1955, and it was used by the RAF and the United States Army Air Forces. But in the 1960s all the runways were removed and aggregate excavated, and now you've got these beautiful lakes remaining. And just a little bit further along the ridge in these trees is the Battle Command HQ for the old airfield. So this was high up on the ridge. Basically this was here that if the airfield was ever, you know, taken over by German paratroopers or what have you, then some folk could come up here, a radio operator, an officer and a couple of other men, and they could oversee the defence of the airfield from up here. And there are a couple of these sort of cupolas or lookout positions, one which looks over the airfield, and then the second one, which is quite unusual, but this looks over Ibsley Common. Of course that would have been quite an obvious place for German gliders to land. But it's a fascinating place to explore. You can go inside, and there is an information board, but I'm not going to go in today. I did come 5 or 6 years ago with Logan, but there's so much glass in there. I want to look after Fiver, and I haven't got my spotlight with me anyway. I've just come off Ibsley Common now, heading towards Moyles Court, and I'm on a very small section of the Avon Valley Path, which is a long distance path that goes from Salisbury in the north to Christchurch in the south. Well, I've just passed Moyles Court School. I couldn't film there because well, there's some school children out in front playing, so that wouldn't be right. But I want to tell you a bit about the building itself, so I'll see if I can find some photos somewhere and tell you a bit about the history of the place. Well, this building here is Moyles Court School. Now, the manor of Rockford was mentioned in the Domesday Book, and there's been a large house on the site here since the Middle Ages. Moyles Court gets its name from the Moyles family, who were lords of the manor here in 1330. But the present house originates from the late 17th century, and it was home of Alice Lisle. More of her in a moment, but basically she was the last woman to be publicly beheaded in England. And the building was used as an officers' mess in the Second World War, sort of to do with the RAF Ibsley, of course, and then it became a school in 1963. Now, I mentioned Alice Lisle living at Moyles Court, and she's actually buried at Ellingham Church. Just before I started the walk today, I drove a very short distance to Ellingham Church just to check it out and to check out Alice's grave. Well, this is the church at Ellingham. Now, there was once a Saxon church on the site, but the present building has origins to the 13th century, and it's the Church of St Mary and All Saints. I think it was once the church of a priory that was here, that was founded in 1160. That was a cell of the Abbey of Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte in Normandy. I think that's how you pronounce it. But the priory was dissolved in 1414, and there's no evidence of any building left today, I believe, other than the church, as the chancel may well have been the priory chapel, and the nave, the parish church. So the chancel and nave, although they originate from the 13th century, were remodelled in the 15th century when a turret or bellcote was added, and the south porch was added in 1720. But I love the sundial above the porch there. Well, in we go. And there's the font just on the left hand side there, the far side of the nave, and then making my way through the nave. There's a lovely sort of, I suppose you'd call it a wooden chapel on the left there, and then a wooden pulpit on the right, and then there's some scriptures up on the wall there, and then going through into the chancel. And there's the organ, some beautiful carvings at the top, and then through into the far end of the chancel, terrific stained glass window at the far end, looking splendid with the sun streaming through. And I love the wooden panels on the ceiling as well. What a beautiful church. And just to the side of the porch is the grave of Alice Lisle. Well, as I'm standing by the grave of Alice Lisle, let me tell you a little bit about her. I'm going to do a little reading a passage or two from this excellent book, Portrait of the New Forest by Brian Vesey-Fitzgerald. Got to have my glasses for this. There is more history here. In the churchyard, close to the south wall of the nave, is a massive chest tomb, inscribed, and the lettering is now almost illegible. Here lieth Dame Alicia Lisle and her daughter Anne Hortle, who died on the 17th of February 1702. Alicia Lisle died on the 2nd of September 1685. That brief inscription commemorates a tragic and terrible story. Alicia Lisle, the wife of one of the judges of Charles I, the judge who is said to have drawn up the form of sentence that was read to the king, lived at Moyles Court and worshipped in this church. She was 71 when she died, and she died because she gave shelter to two men after the Battle of Sedgemoor. One, a dissenting minister named John Hicks, and the other, a young man named Nelthorpe, both of who had fought in the battle on the side of Monmouth. She was betrayed by someone in the hamlet. She was arrested together with the two men by a Colonel Penruddock, who was undoubtedly delighted to have the job, for 30 years earlier Judge Lisle had sentenced his father, John Penruddock, to death as a traitor. Alicia Lisle was tried by Judge Jeffreys at the bloody assize at Winchester. She swore that she had known Hicks only as a dissenting minister, and she did not know Nelthorpe's name until he was arrested, and that she had no idea that either had taken part in Monmouth's rebellion. But Jeffreys was in his best form as judge and prosecutor. The scene in Winchester Great Hall has been described often enough. The astonishment of the foul-mouthed judge raved at the old lady, the muttering of the Hampshire gentleman, the movement of one of them to protect her, an action for which he paid with his life, the refusal of the jury to bring in a verdict of guilty, the rage of the judge and the threats by which he finally forced them to change their minds and their verdict. Once he had secured the verdict he wanted, Jeffreys sentenced Alicia Lisle to be drawn on a hurdle to the place of execution and there burned alive, and he directed that the sentence be carried out that very afternoon. But Hampshire refused point blank to carry out such a sentence, and Jeffreys dared not enforce it. He had had one rather unpleasant experience coming through the New Forest, and as a result, even though he could bully and browbeat the Hampshire squires, he had something of respect for the determination of the ordinary Hampshire folk. The execution of Alicia Lisle was postponed for 5 days, because the bishop and clergy of Winchester intervened at the judge's lodgings in the presence of a large, silent, obviously threatening crowd of Hampshire countrymen. For once in his life, Judge Jeffreys was frightened, but pleas to the king were no use. The king, perhaps remembering his father's death, was adamant. Dame Lisle must die. But another sentence was substituted, for he was told bluntly that the original one would bring all Hampshire to arms. And on the 2nd of September 1685, Alicia Lisle, frail and ill, stepped quietly from an upper window of the Eclipse Inn in Winchester Square, hard by the cathedral, onto the block and was beheaded. Her body was carried back to Ellingham, accompanied all the way by hundreds of men on foot, a triumphal procession rather than a funeral cortege. 4 years later, a special Act of Parliament annulled the conviction on the ground that the verdict was, and I quote, procured by the menaces and violences and other illegal practices of Lord Jeffreys. What a sad story. We're just crossing over the Dockens Water once more, this time crossing a ford. Do you fancy a dog dip just yet? No, he says. And this poor old tree here is what is left of the Moyles Court oak. It used to be one of my favourite trees, but unfortunately 2 or 3 years ago it was officially declared dead, and so all the branches were cut back for health and safety. Such a shame, because I mean, if you look at one of the old maps, it was actually once known as the king of the forest. But it used to be one of my favourites. But there is another very large oak that is still alive over on the other side of the road. I've just bumped into one of my viewers, a lovely chap called Malcolm. He's a local, lives around these parts and watches all the videos. Lovely to meet you, Malcolm. Of course, he's now the proud owner of a limited edition Dave's Countryside Walks badge. Well, we're nearly at the end of the walk. We're back at the Rockford Sandpit. We've just got one more building to visit. Can you guess what that might be? Well, did you guess right? The Lisle pub, which is only a few hundred yards away from the car park at the Common. Now, it was a school. It shows on an 1879 map as a school, but it became a pub in the 1960s. And as it's open, wow, we ought to pop in. Purely for research purposes for the video, of course. Well, folks, we've come to the end of the walk. We thought we'd do the end scene here in the beer garden of the Lisle. Just quality testing their London Pride. Oh, lovely. And of course, it's sausage time for you. I mentioned at the beginning, we lost Logan a few weeks ago. Fiver doesn't like crisps, but I do. Of course, Logan's favourite were pipers, so in his memory, I've got a packet. We hope you enjoyed the walk today. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and do leave a comment, and do check out our Facebook page, Dave's Countryside Walks. So until we meet again, thanks for watching, and cheerio. Cheers, lad.